one's called Visitors. This one I always give a warning that there's a cat that loses its litter in this poem. We kept the branches from the dying tree in the workshop. By morning, a canopy of mushrooms had grown from the pile, head against head, a bird bone cathedral, and Dad said, "We won't cut these branches for firewood, not till the visitors have left." How long had the mushrooms been waiting in the bark, ready to birth in the cool womb of the workshop? By morning they were gone, leaving only the smell of oysters. We planted trees to dry the bog, built stone walls to break the wind, sunk coils to draw warmth from the earth. Solid things, for us and the people next, but who here is not a visitor? It was the same summer the cat lost her first litter, only just an adult herself, too young, too hot. What to do with half-formed kittens? We put them in a cardboard box at the centre of a bonfire while she smelt at her basket, looking for her motherhood. After that, she spent more time on the farm across the valley. The night was as warm as day, and I stood at the boundary of the garden, where this land stops and another begins. And Dad, barely clothed, joined me. I offered an earphone, and we listened to music while we watched the breeze tread footprints on the ready-to-harvest wheat. This heat will break, this song will end, and I will leave for the city, this summer's work done. Mycelium under my bare feet as I walk to bed. The soil fits between my toes. And what's left of the fire smokes around my father and his vigil over his gentle valley. God for the season. I'm a writer and a musician, and I always end up writing from experience. If ever I try and start off writing about a concept or a big theme, I come a bit unstuck. So I always end up starting off with an experience and then linking that to a concept later. So I always end up writing quite earthy and quite sensual pieces. And I think that comes from the fact that I'm quite a tactile person. So I think that's just part of who I am. But also I've been very lucky to grow up with quite a lot of access to nature. So when I was a child in the Midlands, there's some woods behind my house which I'd go out and play in. And then later on in my childhood, when I moved to Pembrokeshire, then I had all the coastline to explore as well. So I end up writing about how we connect to nature, how we connect to our immediate landscape around us from that very embodied point of view. And then what I like to do, and I don't know whether this is partly the influence of the fact that I'm a musician as well, I sort of approach writing, the craft of writing, as a form of play. So I don't know whether that's from, noodling around on guitars and pianos and that kind of thing, but, sort of shifting words around and shifting ideas around. I find that a really exciting thing to do, and I find a lot of magic comes out of the editing phase for me, actually. So quite often an initial draft is writing down the experience, really getting that onto paper first, and then I do a lot of work after that, moving stuff around, fiddling around with things until it really starts to say something, because I think part of the magic comes from fitting things into form. Adding those restrictions on later, for me, is how I often approach a piece, because I think when I set off starting to write something about a big concept or a big theme, I quite often come unstuck. So I have to go from that point of, connecting to the world from that embodied point of view, and then drawing the ideas and concepts out of that as things fit together into a form. So that's how I go about writing something. And what really excites me then is the the connections that then builds outwards into the world when it reaches an audience as well, which is something quite remarkable, really. That's something, it's been like quite an individual piece of play for me, as I think about it, and then that going out of the world and that saying something, and sharing something, and then having my embodied experience, then someone can enter into that if they want and explore my little world. I think that's quite remarkable. Dry stone walling. Once in a while a stone slots in like a tooth in a skull. The stones around it, which were unsure, settle, nestle into place, seem to sing in earthy satisfaction, hum to the finding of their fulcrum that no hammer blow could ever knock out. Ed and I, we share a cigarette when the wall is done and my fingers have taken on a smell from below the soil, from some deep anatomy, like we've turned the innards of this country. Our small piles of stones are markers on the surface of this world. I take another drag. Is this the smell of headstones on my hands? I get very passionate about any sort of artwork. I think operates as kind of like a connective tissue between people, and so for example, what my band does now at the end of the show, we'll come out into the audience and we'll teach a song to the audience, and we'll stand right in the middle and everyone circle around, and then we'll play it together. And although the whole show has been coming together, connecting over music, this is sort of a more obvious thing of we sing a song together at the end, and it's a sort of joining together and a celebration of being together. And then we get to applaud everyone as well. It's not just that thing of you're the audience, we're the band, or we're the performer, and you're applauding us and we're bowing. It's like, we're joined in this together. So I think that's what really fires me up, especially to get up on stage and perform. And this is something I've been looking at over the last couple of years, how my writing, what my role is as a writer in a broader sense, really, because the actual craft of writing can be a relatively solitary thing. So I've been looking at what ways there are to bring what my sort of philosophy is about artwork, how to bring that more into my practice. So last 3 or 4 years I've been working with community farming, which already is about giving people access to the land, giving people access to how their food is grown, and also connecting people not necessarily like-minded people, but people with an interest in this stuff, bringing them together. So I've been looking at being involved in that as a writer. So I've been writing poetry and prose about community farming for about 3 or 4 years now, and I'm really happy it's starting to come out into the world now. So it's been taking what is my sort of earthy central approach to writing, and then bringing that into community farming, which often has the idea of giving that, earthy and, being involved on the land, bringing those things together and being able to express that. And perhaps that can give another way in to people, for people to get involved in community farming, or at least have the experience of that. So that's been what I've been working on for a couple of years now. This poem is about when I was staying on a farm, and the farmer there was very poetic and quite lyrical, and he sort of gave me a task, which was, he said, if I stayed on the farm for 6 weeks, I had a chance of meeting the soul of the farm. And I didn't know what that would look like, so I sort of spent my time looking for something quite dramatic, like, I don't know, a light in the sky, or singing angels or something like that. But in the end it was actually something really small. So this is called Meeting in the Night. I crossed the empty horse paddock and descended the dark and steep path down sea-misted steps that glittered in the lighthouse flash. and the flotsam rope handrail was the texture of fish skin, leading the way like a watery dream to the caravan in the nook which was my home for the season. I shared the place with some previous residents. A wetsuit on the line was a hovering mariner, nettles lead in like nosy neighbours. White snails circumnavigated the caravan. That night, on the step to the caravan's door, there was a new visitor, who in my torch shone like a jewel, unbothered by me or my light, a toad at the front door. And if I were a sailor coming back home, then it was the beat of your little amphibian heart that guided all ships of the night to port, promise from the land itself that I wasn't lost, not here, living in the warm armpit of the land. The next day, I tried to search online for the meaning of the meeting, and toads are bad luck, they said. But then I won the lottery, fell in love, and world peace was declared. They announced it on Radio Pembrokeshire. And so toads must be good luck after all. I asked the farmer, and he said it made sense. There were more angels in the nooks of his farm than he cared to count. So, as you've probably gathered, I work in a couple of different forms. Sometimes that's a real blessing. If one is a bit of a struggle, can turn to another. But other times, it's quite hard to keep it all going at the same time. So I would, in 5 years' time, it would be great if I had the space and time to be able to work across a number of different forms, but also be bringing them together as well. So looking at ways of, bringing music and poetry together, and so I'm looking at writing a musical, for example, establishing my role as quite an earthy, sensual writer. I think that's really the sort of the avenue I want to go down. This poem is about when I visited a friend and stayed with them in London, and they lived with their landlord at the time, who was a bit paranoid about having the flat very secure and locked up. So I was the last leaving in the morning, and I triple checked I'd locked all the locks on the front door. But what I had done was I'd left the patio door at the back wide open. So this is about the fallout of that. It's called When I Let the Frogs In. When I went out, I left the patio door wide open. Even though you were living in that optimism-free town, your flat wasn't burgled, but you returned to find that small frogs had gotten in and taken residence in the cupboards of your kitchen. You kept barely any food in the place, but they ate all the fajitas you were saving for that night. I then showed poor judgment with the wine I bought as an apology, with its 3 frogs on the label. And I guess that made it seem less sincere, that frogs were only a laughing matter to me. Your message a fortnight later was to say, the frogs are still here. Less obvious, but sometimes you found one beside the last roll of toilet paper, or squirming slightly flattened under your pillow if you forgot to pay some bill or use the last of the milk before breakfast. It's little wonder, with the frogs even hiding behind the words of every conversation, that you moved out and we didn't talk about it, until eventually they became the little frogs that aren't as funny as they used to be, the ones that hop between our drinks in city bars and glop on the punchlines of our drunk jokes.